Chapter 27. The moonlight pierced through the branches of the tree I found myself in. The soft, silvery blue light accentuated the deadly silence of the forest around me. Lower yet, the light died out almost completely at the forest floor. The cool breeze drifted through my fur, causing me to shiver as my nerves flared with each movement. A heightened sense of awareness was accompanied by feral, rushed thinking. My pupils contracted, warding out the light from above and focusing on the prey I yet tracked. I couldn't keep my eyes focused as I steadily darted them back and forth, taking in all movement. I could smell her on the breeze, a light string of saliva drifting out from the rows of razor-like teeth in my mouth at the sensation. Her breathing was irregular as she crouched beneath the overhang of a rocky outcropping. The stream that undoubtedly carved it eons ago was still flowing at her feet as she struggled to regrow the basic structure of her foreleg, if not for mere balance concerns. I shifted, movement barely concerning my conscious effort as I slithered between three sets of trees, extending myself out and closer to her. My harsh claws scraped gently along the bark of the tree that I landed in, silently watching from above. Holding onto the tree was easy when I had extra limbs. 8 extra appendages extended from my back, although the term must be used loosely. Each was almost 12 meters long at this point, flexing and twitching of their own accord like starving snakes as I watched her. They were repulsive things, I noted. The majority of their surface area had taken on the same texture as my flesh, coiled, lumpy, lightly oiled, and gunmetal black. Dark red sores and ruptures covered them, occasionally squirting out a blast of pus as they shifted and flexed. The smells were hellish, and that was being generous. They were organic, yet I also saw corded metal and energy running down them. These were, without a doubt, exactly what a biological weapon would look like. Yet for all of their speed, flexibility, and striking power, there was something far more frightening about these tentacles. I watched a visual distortion drift lengthwise along a portion to my head. My sensors were unable to pick up the effect itself, regardless of me knowing exactly what it was. A byproduct of the slipstream technology was folding of spatial connectivity. The protected living organisms from the many complications of fast light travel, of course. It had a few other applications, however. Out of the distortion came a partially liquid but rapidly solidifying blade, jagged in shape as it took form rapidly. They could pop out of me anywhere, just like the tentacles themselves, it would seem. Without a doubt, I was a monster. I was close enough to hear her blood rushing through her veins. At least whatever passed for blood in that artificial body. I knew my body couldn't process it, but at this time, I realized these things extended out of me could. Oh, and how they hungered too. Their wanton, starved desires made me salivate as I slipped down the tree. A tentacle extended above me, rearing back like a snake as a spear-like head extended out of the maw tip. No sound, no warning. I wasn't about to delusion myself with giving her a sporting chance. No, I just lashed out when it was ready. Her eyes widened at the last possible second and she dove sideways, just barely missing the blade driving itself through her eye. I landed an instant later, propelled out of the tree at unnatural speeds by 3 additional tentacles. My forth drew blood using the claws extending from it as she rolled out of the way, a fresh series of wounds sliced into her cheek. She let out a blast of flames from her right forehead as she slipped up to her feet, sending out 3 fireballs that blew away the base of the tree I was at prior, sending the entire thing crashing down to the earth. On second thought, it was no surprise it was dead quiet. If I was a small furry and classified as a woodland creature, I would be running the hell away from here as fast as possible. I entertained the idea of classifying my prior stuff exactly as that as I landed silently in the tree some 60 meters away, cloaked once again in darkness. "Stop hiding, you chicken shit! Face me!" she screamed into the darkness, rapidly spinning in a sharp circle as she tried to find me in the dense forest. I resisted laughing, thankfully. Even if I had been compelled by some strange form of honor or ego to do just that, this was far too much fun. Her heart rate skyrocketed as she had listened to the sounds for another second before shifting closer to the trees. Duking it out at point-blank range was sporting and the gentle thing to do. Did she forget already that I was a monster? Besides, I wanted her to taste the fear that she'd forced down my throat earlier, preferably mixed with blood as I tore hers out. I wanted her to pay for the hell she'd just made Applejack watch. Even Twilight's floor and balcony deserved a few stabs of revenge. Oh yeah, she also killed me. My claws tightened at the thought as I flickered effortlessly closer. Personally, I could keep this up all night. She didn't look nearly as fortunate, however. Her strangely realistic-looking blood dripped from dozens of wounds dotting her body. Honestly, I was surprised she managed to get the foreleg restored so fast. She was panting heavily and rested against a large tree, peeking around it rapidly before also looking up into it. Ah, she had caught on. Pity was absurdly dark, and I was an equally dark shade of gray. After her body moved faster than I thought possible while avoiding my first barrage of tentacle attacks, I have been playing hit and run with her. My mind in newfound rage told me to lunge and not stop attacking until she was shredded mulch, but I managed to keep the bloodlust in check for the most part. Wearing her down and learning what she was capable of seemed more productive. I slipped into the branches of the tree next to hers, tentacles shooting down vertically along the trunk and lashing out from the base. Predictably, she saw them coming out of the darkness and lashed out with a slash of her hoof, releasing a surprisingly crescent-shaped wave of flames. I was already out of the tree, however, flipping sideways with actually calculated precision. 2 tentacles got singed before I moved them back up and away. Her eyes winced down the moment the trunk exploded from her attack, the difference briefly stunning her. There, I noticed that her own attacks would blind her with the light they released. I landed behind her on all 4 legs, digging into the dirt before lunging as fast as I could manage. There was no time to raise a claw, so instead I improvised. With a feral cry, the top of my head rammed into her lower back as hard as I could manage. She let out a scream as I felt something snap against my forehead, both of us spilling over and smashing into the burning tree debris. She lashed out with a kick I didn't even feel upon landing, but it did serve to wedge it into my chest, preventing me from landing on top of her. She charged a blast of flames in her hoof, but 2 of my tentacles whipped down and smashed blades into both of her forelegs. She gritted her teeth, barely blocking my downward claw attack with the other back leg. With both back legs up now, she managed to shove hers out from under me, sparks flying from her shoulders as the blades scraped along them. Damn, her skin was tough. Sliding, she used both forelegs to launch another close-range fire crescent. On instinct, my tongue lashed out from my mouth, extending 2 meters in front of me while covered in barriers. Near's eyes widened in surprise as I smashed it along the path of the slash she made, knocking the attack off into the forest. My tongue pulled back just as 4 tentacles lashed out instead, their ending for balancing me again and raising me off the ground. Just like first time, her body accelerated, launching her a good 5 meters backwards before she raised her head fully again, landing on all 4 legs. Her horn led up the scent, launching a barrage of fireballs. Shit! I let her get too much distance on me. Thankfully, the primal monster that directed my instincts was reacted far quicker. The forelimbs supporting me shifted, flinging me in to the right and far clear of the incoming attack. My mind replayed the video of her movement as I landed quietly behind a tree, the entire left side of my body lighting up from a series of explosions I'd avoided. It was fast, but definitely there. Her hooves had flared up for a split second, and she used them like some sort of primitive rocket to propel herself away from me, getting more distance to attack with. Leaping away from the tree again, I lunged along the clearing she landed in, using the cover of the trees to block her series of straight-shot blasts. She was limited to close range and seemed to have an affinity for fire-based attacks then.
Activate the full tentacles. They'll eat her alive.
I heard whispered in my inner ear the voice of the book. No, I hadn't dropped the shielding when they activated, and I wasn't about to now. They'd consume everything, not just her. I I paused an instant later, realizing what I had just thought. It was almost disastrous. A fire stick shot and burning runes dancing around it. There were layers to the shot. The first was just a container. The second fueled the shell like a rocket. The third tore through a layer of shields before exploding. I recognized the setup, it would seem. She was skilled to rapid fire these things. There was just one problem with the technique. The outer layer was a barrier. With a bit of finesse, my tongue found the blast instead. It deftly curled around the thin barrier, strengthening it before crushing inwards. The blast became a marble-sized orb of heat before I swallowed it and pulled out the energy inside of me, adding to my reserves. Nero looked disgusted as I dove down and sprinted at her. "Monster!" she exclaimed, drawing forth another burning crescent wave at me. That was ironic, coming from her. I leapt over the wave of flames and landed within 6 meters of her. Do it! I lunged again while releasing a feral roar of rage. Rather than lash out with my tentacles, she leapt backwards again, and I watched the runes light up on her hoofs, right into my trap. Smiling, I whipped my upper left tentacle at her an instant later. She smirched back as it missed, passing right in front of her. That's when the shield around it disappeared, if only for half a second. The air itself was sucked into the void that my tentacle's tip became. Her eyes widened as the flames along her forelegs sputtered, being closer to the tentacles as it whipped past. The back legs burst out in fire a moment later, unfortunately for her. I've never seen someone plant their face into the ground in such a spectacular manner before. Her horn snapped off as she ran her head into the ground at high velocity before my back legs flipped out the other direction. Oh crap. I hadn't thought this through very well. My eyes widened as well as her direction suddenly reversed, sending her grinding along the ground on her face directly for me. At the last second, I managed to jump using my tentacles as a spring. Her already clipped my back legs still and ended up flipping me forwards regardless. Disoriented, I managed to spin in midair and land on all fours again, rotating once again before sliding to a stop. Thankfully, my CPU course kicked in and rapidly reoriented me a moment later. Nero flipped over and landed on her back, blood coming from a large gash along her forehead. Her horn had apparently shattered, leaving just a stump of it attached to her forehead. She let out a primal scream of rage and clutched both sides of her head after landing, shaking it while lying on the ground. Well, I forgot she had an empathy link with that body. Now that I look closer, that probably hurt like a bitch. Regardless, my eyes narrowed and I raised all 8 tentacles up into the air, popping blades out of every one of them. No, letting her recover wasn't on my agenda. All 8 descended at once with the full intent of unceremoniously grinding her to a thick paste in an instant. She whipped her foreleg backwards at the same time, however, instinctively lashing out. I could barely track the flash of light and searing arc before it smashed into my chest in a tight spiral. A loud explosion knocked me flying backwards, causing my tentacles to miss entirely, smashing into the ground instead. I spread them out and dug them along the forest floor, anchoring my side and sawing myself to a crawl until I could fully steady myself. System scanned and noticed light dermal damage to my chest and forelegs from the detonation, with primary and secondary armor systems unharmed. That attack was for speed and distance creation. Glaring, I rose my vision back up to meet hers as she stood, shaking visibly and bleeding heavily. "That's it! I don't care anymore! You are dead! You and this entire forest are going to burn, and I'll pick the DNA out of the ashes!" she screamed, flames starting to dance up around her. She practically trembled in rage. My eyes narrowed as the sensors in them picked up the temperature increase, focusing into her hands rapidly. That amount of energy wasn't good. My first instinct was to dash away again and resume the hit and run tactics, but I realized that wasn't possible. If she got too destructive, the collateral damage to the force would be phenomenal. My body shifted forwards, flicking itself into a vault in an instant instead. She screamed in fury this time as she whipped both forelegs forwards, standing up completely on her back hooves. A radiating orb of white and orange flames expanded instantly from her held-out limbs, blanketing the entire burning clearing in a bright white light. Damn it! I started to recognize the magic and didn't like where it was going. I'm pretty sure I'd only seen that particular attack performed once, but I remembered what it did well enough. She wanted to end this in one shot, and I wasn't entirely sure I'd persist through that. Processing power spiked as calculations ran through my head. Time slowed again as a burst of adrenaline combined with the heightened mental capacity and slowed things to a crawl. All 8 of my extra limbs spread out as far as they could, 4 to each side as I lashed them out forwards. There was only one option if I didn't want her to reduce everything in a ridiculously large cone in front of her to ash, and I wasn't going to be pleasant either way. My eyes widened as a true memory drifted into me from the individual I was created from. The old geezer walked in front of our group, paced slow yet strutting. He was probably well over 140, but the crazy bastard was still teaching. Jokes amidst the barracks said he'd invent a spell to reanimate himself after he croaked just to keep his position as head instructor. At this point I wasn't so sure that it was a joke. He turned sharply, crossing both lightly furred arms over his chest. Patches were missing here and there, but he obviously took good care of himself despite his advancing age. So, recap. Restoration, alteration, transmutation, enchantment, conjuration, illusion, divination, and evocation. Those are the 8 primary schools of magic. Everyone here should have their tactics and summaries memorized, regardless of your actual profession. Knowing your enemy is the first step towards defeating them, he reiterated. I'd studied hard regardless and knew the techniques of all of them by heart. Each was broken up into categories, but that much was irrelevant. I specialized in alteration and transmutation, of course, being an engineer. More specifically, I had a special fondness for barrier magic, which was a subset of alteration. But that was for a different reason entirely. Regardless, I was a support type. While I knew of the techniques of the other categories, I couldn't actually cast any. My elongated ears perked as I listened, knowing where this was going anyway. I'd used Prudentia to take a peek at his lesson plan last night as usual. Today, we cover basic balances between the categories. Right off the bat, we'll discuss the most likely cause of most of your deaths in the future. Evocation. It's classified as the manipulation of energy at a molecular level in order to transform it into a different effect in order to provoke a reaction. Fancy talk aside, it's used to blow shit up. If any of you survive your evocation training later this week, you'll know what I mean. He continued, glaring at each of us in turn before moving on. Evocation didn't frighten me. As a barrier user, the only classes of magic that I really had to worry about were divination and restoration. One was annoying to the point of mind-numbing frustration, and the other was single-handedly the most lethal class of magic in existence. Always stay on a healer's good side. Reversing the healing spells was not something pretty to see. Those of you in alteration or transmutation specializations are probably laughing now, but you need to listen up. A good amount of caution never hurts anyone, and I'm going to show you why. The uppermost tiers of evocation mess around with things you'd better damn well hope you never see coming at you. This, for example, he warned. Wait, he wasn't seriously crazy enough to activate an evocation inside of the gymnasium, was he? Sure enough, flames exploded around him as he gathered up a massive orb of heat and energy directly in front of him. His fur lightly blowing gathered into the size of a beach ball, radiating orange and white light. What the hell was that? This, you soggy hairballs, is called Gigaflare. An unoriginal name for a rather simple process. That's what's sick about it, really. It's too simple in theory. Imagine making a magical rune array to produce energy. Then you smash that energy together to cause a reaction to make even more energy. Using that extra energy, you'd then do it again. Pretty sweet deal, right? He offered, gesturing with a nod towards the orb. The glass nodded mostly. I frowned. Exponential energy increases were fine and all, but the heat coming from what was holding indicated something else entirely. This is exactly what the medium end magic and evocation deals with. Turns out, Most of their higher-end stuff comes from apprentices like you screwing up and leveling a few city blocks by total accident. So, long story short, guess what happens when you get the hiccups and drop the energy tethers to this orb halfway through charging it? He asked, looking amused. Hiccups? Seriously? Well, if you dropped the tethers, you'd lose control over the spell. The failsafe would kick in and disrupt it, and wait, unless the student forgot to apply the failsafe. Then the reaction would spiral out of control and... Ah! I can see the look of horror on your face. You, up front. Got a guess? The professor asked, gesturing towards me with a grin. I saw nervously and reasoned, well, if they forgot the failsafe, the energy reaction would spiral out of control and explode in an exponentially larger detonation than what they put into it. The professor's grin widened and he nodded enthusiastically. Bingo! Of course, the time it was discovered didn't go so well. Lost the entire class of 207 and our 456 gymnasium, but we learned quite a bit. With a little bit of an adjustment, it turns out you can kick the energy in a single direction. It makes for a nifty attack, he explained. Oh hell. He wasn't seriously going to... He promptly turned around and aimed the ball into the corner of the gymnasium before releasing a pulse outwards from his hands. The energy in the blast magnified and slammed outwards. That little bump he'd get was all it needed once the fragile balance was lost. It exploded outwards from a radius expanding to 7 or 8 times his body length in pure oval shape of radiating flames. An actual corona formed around it of superheated energy before exploding into a cone-like wave of white and orange light and heat. The side of the gymnasium disappeared into a blackened shadow before blowing away to ash an instant later as what looked like the maw of hell itself smashed through it. The cone extended for far past the gymnasium, and I saw one of the orbiting survey blimps explode into the distance. Those were over the fields of ore 14 kilometers away, though. What the hell are you doing down there? Was suddenly screamed over the professor's belt communicator. He lowered his still smoking hands and just burst into copious amounts of laughter as he watched half the corner collapse upon itself. Yep, he was crazy. My extra limb smashed around the rapidly elongating oval of burning death as I leapt directly into it. There was no way to stop the reaction, as she likely released it already. That left only one possible solution, and it wasn't going to be pretty. The professor said trying to block or absorb that kind of attack was foolish and pointless. The only defenses were to either not be there when the attack hit, or to redirect it as best you could. Dodging looks pretty good about now, but if I did that, half the force would probably be burnt to ash. I didn't know which direction Ponyville was in either. That only left one choice. Bears activated along all 8 of my tentacles, expanding outwards as I slammed to a halt right in front of the energy buildup. Well, if this didn't work, I was almost assured a rather fast death. With that optimistic outlook cemented in my mind, I activated all 8 barriers. Slowly, they started to expand outwards, forming an entire cage around the buildup of flames. Nero made a scoffing noise as the orb flared with light just as my tentacles connected together behind her, sending both of us inside with the blast. Seriously? You prioritize those rats in this world above yourself? Wow, you're stupid! She screamed a moment later. My eyes narrowed. Yeah, I probably was an idiot, but this was all I knew. Even if they didn't want me, they were all I had. The book itself seemed to dislike the thought, too. I felt it. So close yet so far. Shifting, I felt that connection jingle, and to my surprise, Keela's signal came alive again. I hadn't heard from her ever since Nero and I had started fighting. I just assumed she was being blocked. After a light burst of static, she finally spoke up in a whisper with, "I'm sorry. I can't stop her. This wasn't what I wanted. I couldn't. But I can do this." My eyes widened. She sat in a chair with wires connected to her temples. A faint smile danced across her features as her hand reached out to the right, struggling and shaking as she moved it. I saw a twisted and torn leather strap on the chair, and a thick, dark liquid ran down the armrest. Keela! Her hand finally landed on the counter next to her, dropping more of her blood down along the metal. The book! Her claws brushed against the cover before she latched onto it, and in one fluid motion hauled it against her chest and hugged it to herself. The energy flared into me through her link an instant later, and it all suddenly made sense. Smirking, I drew upon the energy and my bears exploded, exponentially covering the entirety of her blast in a massive cylinder shape. Stopping the blast would be foolish. Giving it a top and bottom to leak out of, however, would be far easier. What the hell? You're not this powerful! Nero exclaimed, trying to break the reaction down, but instead before it went off. She had just expected to punch through my shield with no problem at all, I realized. Her frantic clawing made it far worse. Instead of deactivating the massive chain reaction, she launched it straight downwards instead. Well, this was going to be fun. The explosion radiated outwards in an instant, shattering my entire world into a bright white light. Nero's scream sounded an instant later as the ground around my hoofs gave way. Coughing, I managed to crawl out of the crater. My skin tingled with an irritating amount of heat. Opening my eyes, I winced and gasped as I saw that I was literally glowing red, steam from the air temperature difference wafting amply off me as I dug myself back onto level terrain. The grass was missing. Actually, it appeared to be missing in most of the clearing. The ambient heat radiation from the explosion alone was enough to set fire to the vegetation around the center of the area for a good 6 meters. The newly formed crater itself fared far worse than the center of it, literally crystallizing various minerals in the soil under the heat. If the shield hadn't been there, that probably would have done unspeakable levels of damage to the forest. A wary glance up showed a rather large cloud of smoke and sparks wafting into the air. I could only imagine what the column of flames had looked like a second ago. Well, if any pony was looking for us, they wouldn't have to look very hard. That display could easily be seen from Ponyville. Damn. Given the state of my ringing ears as well, I guess no pony was asleep in Ponyville either at this point. That explosion had been deafening. Nero coughed weakly, crawling out of the crater on the other side. Her left foreleg, ironically, was gone, leaving only a burnt stump. Her back legs didn't look much better, but were rapidly reforming as she shakily tried to stand up. Her fur was gone, along with a lot of her mane and tail, embers drifting off her skin as she stood. I sighed. Nothing could be easy, could it? Snapping my back right leg around to the proper angle, I pulled the cords together again and formed it solidly to my body, calmly noting the broken leg. After I steadied myself, I extended out all 8 tentacles from my back once more. There were shells of their former selves, but rapidly lashed out with hundreds of miniature versions of themselves. I smiled as I sought out and ate the remains of the old tentacles, rapidly reforming as well as I turned. No, I didn't have any forgiveness left. Oddly, what he just tried to do didn't really lower my opinion of her any further. Maybe she'd fallen as low as she could. I didn't have time to debate my opinion, however, and just extended blades out of my extra limbs as I went. Damn it! You're a monster! Nero muttered after coughing again. She slowly started to back away, hobbling with each shift that should have went to the limb that no longer existed. I couldn't help but notice that she wasn't regenerating anymore. I shook my head as I rounded the crater. Tentacles extended to either side of me, forming seamless, if not distorted, scythe blades. I finally spoke.
Of course I'm a monster. You killed me and turned me into this. What does that make you, I wonder?
I questioned, expression emotionless as I rapidly approached striking range. On 3 limbs and looking like she'd been put through a blender and then an oven, she was far too slow to outpace me. I didn't really care about her answer, of course. I was going to rip her apart, no matter what she said. No! I'm just trying to save my race. You're trying to kill us! You're just like the council members. You want the Caldarians to die! She denied, narrowing her eyes at me as she realized she couldn't get away. She flicked backwards instead, shakily balancing herself on her hind legs as best the awkward spinal structure would allow for. Her remaining right foreleg extended up again and caught fire, forming another fire blast. I just kept walking. The book was connected to me now. I was done screwing around.
The amusing thing was, if you just talked to me like your sister wanted, I probably would have just given you the data.
I pointed out. Minus the information on the bioweapon, of course. Although that's maybe why she didn't. Bullshit! She spat out before justifying with, You males are all the same. You do whatever you want. At any given time, screw everyone else that happens to be hurt by it. If we need anything from you, it has to be taken by force or you won't even acknowledge us. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Her fire blast launched off an instant later, reminding me of why I was foolish. It was bigger than the one that hit me in the chest, but slightly slower. My forward-most left tentacle swatted away into the ground at a few meters to my left with an H's barrier, not even slowing me down. Anger built back up in me rapidly, eyes narrowing and focusing solidly on her and her once more. My extra limbs began to twitch in anticipation of tearing flesh again. I shook my head slowly.
I don't know what happened to make you think that, but it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not a Caldarian or a pony. I'm a monster, just like you said. And now, I'm going to tear you apart for what you did.
I quietly spoke, eyes softening as I stepped within range. She screamed in rage again, firing almost half a dozen more times. In an instant, my processors gave me the calculations and a target lit up each shot. She was tired now and badly injured. None of the fireballs had much force behind them. I divided it up, a limb for each blast. 5 shots were knocked away from me in the same moment. 3 remaining tentacles lashed out at the same time. She let out a startled yelp as one swept low, knocking her unsteady legs out from under her, and the remaining 2 smashed her into the ground as hard as they could, blades reinforced with Aegis barriers. She screamed in pain as the elongated scythe blades pinned her physically to the ground via her right shoulder and in her left thigh. There was no hesitation and my body moved faster than I thought I could. With my other limbs recovered from their defensive maneuver, I whipped them backwards to throw me towards her and pounced the remaining 5 meters in an instant, landing on top of her to prone form. She screamed, sounding absolutely pissed as she whipped her right foreleg up towards my head as fast as she could, despite the flesh tearing around the blade in the same shoulder. I anticipated it a mile off this time, it being her only remaining defense. My left foreleg was already moving as I landed on her. I knocked her hoof aside, causing her flame whip technique to fail and burn out. She screamed again, in pain this time as the magic exploded, taking her hoof with it in a blast of light. My left claws smashed her limb into the ground as I systematically destroyed both the elbow and shoulder joint an instant later, rendering it immovable. My chest grew cold as she writhed under me, silently screaming after her lungs ran out of breath. No, I was all out of forgiveness. Nothing could undo what she did today. Still, the realism put into her body was strange indeed. Maybe it was specifically to try to seem as real as possible to try and trick me earlier. I thought she'd shift to a solid body being as amorphous as she was. I tried to focus on the technical details as best I could, staving off the urge to tear into her armor. It felt so good to cause her pain, and the bloodlust was delicious. To have this much control when I had none before was, well, addicting to say the least. I could actually feel her matter being pulled into me as I rendered her, my body itself feeding on hers before she even died.
Monster!
She spit out a moment later, glaring up in seething hatred. Even like this, she wasn't afraid. It was almost addicting as her screams. The urge to let her consume her reared its ugly head again. I wanted to keep lashing out until she stopped moving, the taste of her pain lingering long afterwards. She'd feel every last second of the agony until I was sure she deeply regretted coming here. I felt something twitch inside of me, and that cold feeling I just crushed inwards, twisting my expression into a glare. The revelation hit me with both shock and cold acknowledgement. I hated her.
Yes, I'm a monster. It takes one to destroy one. You ruined everything.
I growled out, slamming her hard into the ground beneath her. I could feel her collarbone snap under the pressure of my right hoof, but hardly cared. Instead, my claws dug in, drawing blood. It was surreal. I couldn't even see her as Twilight anymore. That was probably a good thing, though. Now she was just nearer to me. A monster, just like I was. We were both monsters, out in the middle of the forest at night, well, dead set on murdering each other. It was oddly simple. She spat blood up into my face mid-glare. The liquid sizzled instantly and baked onto my cheek. I didn't really pay attention. You're fake. You're a mistake and never could have had anything here. Maybe they all sensed that on some level and never really trusted you in the first place? She suggested, tone venomous. A lump formed in my throat, and some part of me wondered if she was right in that regard at least. It didn't matter now.
You have no right to judge me. You killed me, and now I'm going to kill you. Even if only to protect every pony. Even if they don't trust me.
I whispered softly, swallowing the lump painfully. Her head fell back against the ground and she closed her eyes. Do what you want. You win. Tear this body apart if it makes you feel better. I have what I wanted for the most part anyway. She finally accepted. Oh. Her fearlessness all clicked together instantly. She was just a connection to here, and had already uploaded a lot of data to that connection. All she had to do was log out and pull the data with her. Why would she care what happened after that? Unless... I smiled, sharp teeth glittering in the heat-distorted moonlight. Her eyes widened, and she let out a pitiful mewling noise. I slammed my left hoof, claws and all, directly into her stomach. It punched through all the way to her center in an instant. She gasped and whined in airless agony, and I felt it. She slammed on the release, undoubtedly guessing what I was doing. Too late. My smile twisted into a sneer as I sent the electrical pulse directly into her spine, halting her log-out attempt. Her eyes widened in an instant as she gaped up at me. The reaction was immediate. That cold exterior melted into panic and fear. Lowering myself down to her, I asked softly,
I wonder what happens to your mind if you're torn apart before you can log out. Wouldn't it be a bitch if everything you did tonight actually had consequences for you?
Her eyes widened further, and I realized my guess was dead on. They shivered, and she slowly started shaking her head with what little strength she had left. No. Please, no. She asked quietly, tone changing completely as what was left of her back legs I didn't mean to push her away from me. Using my back claws, I destroyed her leg muscles a moment later, causing her to wince and suddenly scream in pain again. The reaction was dulled, however. She was probably going into shock. Mender! What are you doing? Please, stop this. She'll be punished when she gets out of the machine. Please, she's my sister. Keyless suddenly interrupted, apparently figuring rather rapidly what I had done. I snorted, suddenly realizing that she was exactly the same as the creature under me in that reasoning. Had she expected us to just waltz out of a question with all the data after what she did? The book was right. I should have murdered both of them and just taken it back with me when I first went there.
Yes, Her getting a slap on the wrist after getting free with the data she wanted really helps me. Until it takes back her murdering me after torturing me in front of my friends and turning them against me.
I muttered in response, before glaring back down at the fake toilet below me. My eyes were close enough to hers now that I could see the new radiant blue color reflected as she gasped. They were kinda pretty, reminding me of my old coat color. Why couldn't everything have stayed how it was before? I slammed her back into the ground, shaking now. She let out a pained yelp as I slammed her head into the rock below with another angry thrashing motion. Again and again I hit her, denting and breaking her fake body with each onslaught. She gave up fighting and simply cried there as I slowly destroyed her. Her heartbeat slowed in her chest as more and more blood spilled out of her. Soon.
This is all your fault. You killed me and destroyed everything. I don't care what I am. Maybe I could have been happy here, but now you took all of that for your own selfish reasons.
I growled, eyes narrowing as I actually felt them start to get wet. I hated her. I wanted her to suffer and die just like I had. She ruined my chance at having anything here and turned them all against me. Not that it had taken much, the book reminded. True. Then she killed me after taking everything. I'm sorry. Please, Mender, she begged weakly, her own eyes starting to water too. They were dim and unfocused at this point, the blood slipping out of the left one. Sorry? She was sorry? I smashed her legs again, removing the right one completely.
Oh yeah, that just makes everything better now, doesn't it? You murdered me. I'm a monster, remember? Mender died. You killed him. Do you honestly expect a monster to forgive you?
I screamed now, adding her left shoulder to the list of destroyed parts with another blow. To my surprise, she actually started crying even harder, her body locking up. My emotions tangled up and rage seeped through everything. She didn't have a right to beg for her life. She didn't let me beg for mine, she just took it. My right foreleg twisted upwards, pulling free from her body and raising into the air. I was done with this bullshit. Mender, please, stop! Caleb begged in a shout over the connection. My move paused in midair, scythe-shaped blades twitching as I glared down at the crying, broken image of Twilight Sparkle. There was no recognition there. I fully knew it wasn't Twilight. I hated Nero. Caleb probably helped her too. Please, I'm deleting the data now. Just let her log out. She might be a complete monster, but she's my sister as well. Please? Caleb begged, softer this time. My foreleg froze. Why was she bothering to delete the data? She'd have that even if I killed Nero. Why waste everything her sister did tonight? My eyes softened as my raised claws curled up gently. Keela tried to help throughout all of this, honestly. Or I don't think this was her intent after all, just like she said. To think otherwise seemed a bit irrational, I noticed. The cloudy haze shifted and I became a little bit more aware, more distinctly aware of the book's angers as separate from my own. Urges to tear her apart became clear in my mind, and I shuddered. They weren't entirely mine, I realized. I'd wanted her to die for what she did to me, but this was... I lowered my hoof a little, emotions smashing together inside my chest. I hated her, but if I killed her like this, I'd hurt Keela as well. Suddenly, I was confused. There was a light, almost imperceptible growling noise, followed by a hissed out,
No! Kill her now!
The book's hatred was all around me. There was a haze to my thoughts and vision as I stared down at Nero under me, emotionless. With her wounds and my claws in her gut, I knew she'd die shortly anyway. Did Keela really deserve this, though? No, she didn't. I doubted she saw what her sister really was, but she had already made her decision. My lips curled into a grimace as I glared down at the broken body below me. Nothing was ever fair, it seemed. Why couldn't I just be happy? Why did something always have to try to take that away from me? Halt, creature! Cease your aggressions! Something exploded from in front of me in a voice about 6 decibels higher than the prior explosion, I estimated. Both Nero and I let out a startled jump from the blast that caused my fur to blow backwards. What the hell? Wait, that voice. Both of us glanced up at the same time. Princess Luna herself stood half a dozen meters from me, wings spread out in an extremely threatening manner, with a look of fury on her face. Oh. Oh hell. Well, this complicated things a little. Almost a dozen ponies stood near, all wearing a dark purple armor and wielding various sharp and pointy instruments in their teeth. Help me! Nero groaned out, starting to cry again as she looked back at the Moon Princess. She shifted back to Twilight's voice in an instant, I noticed. A light sigh escaped my throat as I extended my claws again on my raised hoof. Not this again. Well, she'd obviously try anything to live through this situation. That much I kind of respected in her. Twilight Sparkle? Let her go at once, creature! You shall face our wrath otherwise! Princess Luna warned, eyes narrowing from her brief look of shock at seeing the bloodied body of Twilight under me. As much as I really didn't want to face any wrath she could bring forth, I didn't particularly feel like letting Nero go. Princess Luna's negotiating skills left something to be desired. Still, I had no doubt that the Princess of the Moon herself could very easily survive anything Nero could attack her with, but I was more concerned about the far less imposing guards gathered around her. My head cleared now that I separated myself from the still pissed-off book, and I focused as best I could. What were my choices, really? I couldn't let her go and risk untold amounts of complications. If I killed her outright right now, it would cause Keela immense grief and instantly earn the wrath of one of the most powerful beings I'd ever known, undoubtedly leading to my destruction. That wasn't... It clicked, and my eyes softened. Wasn't that ideal? What honestly did I have left, after all? I wasn't a Caldarian or a pony. I didn't belong to either world, really. In truth, I was a biological weapon pretending to be the pony-morphed clone of a Caldarian soldier that had been dead for a while. A joke, really. I lowered my eyes away from Princess Luna, looking down at my bloodied limb embedded into Nero's stomach. If I was a joke, though, it wasn't that funny. At least I wasn't laughing. Knowing what I was, knowing what I'd done and how many innocent lives died directly due to me, there was no way I could bring myself to look any of them in the eyes again. So what was left? I'd wanted it all along. I'd achieved it once already. I've always wanted to protect these ponies. But what if I was a danger to them? It seemed like my very nature all along was nothing but a threat to Equestria. Wasn't the solution obvious then? It was right here, presenting itself to me. I could eliminate every threat to Equestria at the same time and still make Keela happy, all with one motion. Given my luck, I didn't dare ask for more. Maybe a bit of fortune smiled on me after all, in a perverse sort of way. My data readout showed Keela had kept her word and deleted all of Neo's connected memory banks. I closed my eyes and raised my back up to full extension, claws glistening in the moonlight. Neo's eyes widened as I opened mine again and stared down at her. For a moment, we locked our gazes into each other. I almost saw something clashing in her eyes. There was sorrow there, a pain I recognized yet could do nothing for. Her eyes softened as well as she stared into mine. Did she recognize something there? Maybe, if things had been different, we could have been friends. Maybe we had in a different time. Don't you dare, or we will destroy you! The princess screamed out again, a pointless and ignored reminder. Heard it the first time. Maybe after this played out, she'd realize maybe a more subtle track would get better results in future negotiations. Finally, I swallowed painfully and shook my head.
I'm sorry, Keela. I don't think I can talk to you anymore. Thank you for everything.
I quietly spoke, knowing she could hear me. Neo heard me as well and quietly gasped, eyes widening as they grew watery again. I released. Her signal became unblocked again in an instant, earning another widening of her eyes. She hesitated, obviously not even fathoming that I let her go. My claws flexed. The realization sparked through her, heartbeat later. She was gone. The fake corpse of Twilight Sparkle was all that remained under me, eyes glazing over. The image burned into my mind in an instant, and I almost threw up then and there. Deciding it needed to be banished as soon as possible, I exhaled before whipping my clawed hoof down as hard as I could. Her skull was no match for my new strength, and I crushed it. It felt like an icicle that embedded itself in my chest at the same moment. Part of me died with my very blow, I think. The town was ripped free of my hoof a second later, starting to consume her body's mass. Scanning activated memories flashed to and fro in my mind as my twisted body pieced the information back together from that was inside of her. There probably wouldn't be much left, but I let it do whatever the hell it wanted. A glance upwards, half a second later, showed me an utterly horrified Princess Luna. The shock twisted into a look of absolute rage a moment later, and she let out a scream. I swallowed painfully as her horn flared up, and faster than I could track, a black crescent wave of energy tore through the air. The ground under ruptured and cracked as it passed. One spin later, it cleared the distance between us. There was nothing else. I closed my eyes and lifted my head up as best as I was able, revealing the entirety of my neck as the attack came in. "I'm sorry, Twilight," Fluttershy. I winced as I felt the blade of darkness slam into my throat.